Good afternoon. First, I wanted to say Happy Christmas to everybody out there who celebrates Christmas. It's December 26th here, so the day after. Luckily, I have a few days off from work. And it's been really unseasonably cold, frigid cold to be honest, well below freezing the past 3 or 4 days. And even the week before that, we had some pretty much colder weather than we normally have this time of year, at least. So I haven't been doing much in that regard. I actually have been in the midst of restoring a couple some antique pipe wrenches that I came across years back. Here's one here that I'm sort of working on right now. It's a Trimo that it's actually in pretty good shape. It was really nothing major wrong with it, except for the fact that because it was so rusty, it was seized up. But otherwise, there's no missing parts. And here's another one. Honestly don't know the brand of this. This one was a touch rougher, but still a working tool. And here's one that this was my father-in-law. This was his grandfather's another tool. This has a bit of a bend in it. Probably they were cranking down on it pretty hard, and I might try to heat this up and put it in a vise and sort of see if I can gently bend it back into shape. And it still functions just fine. It's just, you can see that maybe there. See that little bend right here. But those I probably won't get back into depending on how the weather is, I probably won't get back into messing with those until the spring. Sorry about that, some trouble, and I was cleaning them. Here's a gigantic, a really heavy mortise chisel that I found this one time in believe it or not, in a trash bin. And I'm having some issues getting the rest of the socket, the old handle out of there. I've tried drawing it. What I think happened is it was probably somebody at some point epoxied a handle into there, and for not understanding that you want to be able to remove the handle of a socket chisel. And it, for if you get damage in your handle, you want to be able to remove it and replace it. But once again, that when we talk about going the route of restoring old tools, you come across this just as often or more than you do when finding like what I would call diamonds in the rough or tools that are reasonably priced in good shape. You oftentimes, when you do find a guy at a garage sale or some such place, when they have a lot of good tools, it's because either they are knowledgeable and they are tool collectors, or perhaps they use those tools, or somebody in their family. When I found that when tools are, especially individual, when you come across individual tools, meaning if you're at a garage sale, or as I said, some such place, a flea market, whatever you want to call it, and you find a booth where there's one plane there among pottery, for example, which you, believe it or not, I've seen. Generally, that plane is going to be, I've said 100 times, I've yet to come across a Stanley type bench plane that has that you can't restore. But if you find a plane like that, you're going to come close, because much of the time it was owned or handled by somebody who had no idea what it was real. I mean, they knew it was a wood plane maybe, and that's all they know about it. And I have a feeling that this chisel fell into that category. It was probably, now firstly, like right here, it is rounded over if you want to call it the point, the tip. It is actually rounded, meaning, which to me means somebody was probably using a grinder and going back and forth with it like that, not understanding that you really don't want a mortise chisel like this. If this is really almost like a timber framing chisel, you don't really want a timber framing chisel like that to have a cambered edge. But leaving that all out of the way, what I wanted to talk about was, this was my Christmas present this year. I said my wife and I try not to, in terms of each other, try not to go overboard with gifts. So this was I asked for, which is a black Arkansas stone, or the surgical stone. I've seen them referred to, I think it says it on the spots actually. Yeah, surgical, there you go, surgical black Arkansas. And the reason I asked for it is I want to, pocket knives is really why I want to use this, but I will use it on chisels, depending on my experience with it. Now, I think I might have sharpened this knife before in one of my videos. I mean, it's sharp, but you can see, perhaps, probably not, but that is tearing a touch. So it's not what I would call, certainly not what I would call razor sharp. It's definitely sharp, sharp enough for everyday use. Cutting. I would use a knife like this for cutting twine, opening heavier boxes, stuff like that. I'm going to try this. I've had this forever, this Starrett honing tool oil here. Not that 3-in-1 oil wouldn't do just as well, but speaking of it, I always use gloves when I sharpen with oil. I mean, I even use them. Well, this has a very, it's kind of cool. I can feel just how fine the stone is. That's a good sign. But I always use gloves when I sharpen with any type of oil, or even water for that matter. What water stone, or at least I try to. With oil especially, I do not mess around. I see videos online all the time where guys, they're rubbing the oil in their fingers and all of that. Now, I'm not going to tell you that getting a little bit of 3-in-1 oil in your hands is going to kill you, but I can tell you that getting 3-in-1 oil, or any type of oil, WD-40 in particular, that's my experience, getting WD-40 into an open cut can lead to some issues. I probably said it before, but I operated an industrial printing press for many years. And when you hear, I suppose when you hear the term press operator, it doesn't sound like it would be a very physical job. And let me tell you that it really, really is. And it's, quite frankly, a dangerous job. And well, firstly, just the first aspect of it that is difficult is, if you've never worked in a factory before, there's generally not much climate control, which doesn't affect you all year. But on a day like today, for example, when Right now it's about 18 or 19 degrees out, which I'm not sure what that is in Celsius. Once again, forgive me, that's like -6 or so. But regardless, it's a very weird dynamic. You're standing on a you're on your feet most of the time, except for your breaks. At my company, we had 2 10-minute breaks and a 15-minute lunch break. But you're on your feet most of that time, and when you're standing on a cold hard floor, it is for hours. It's not very pleasant on your back, your knees, your feet, your ankles. But more important, and in the summer is the exact opposite. You're in sweltering conditions often, with the machines running especially. They do generate heat, friction, all the rollers. That's what's kind of funny about in the summer you hate setting up the press. In the winter you love it because you're in a, when you open up the press sections, it's nice and warm on the inside of them. But the real danger is with operating a press, an industrial press, is firstly there's each press has dozens of very sharp knives on it, and secondly there is a lot of grease and a oil, things like that, all over the press for lubrication. And I mean, we had hydraulic oil, machine oil, grease. Like as an operator, you had to take the mechanics courses, obviously, and part of that course was learning how to grease the machine, which sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but there is actually a sort of a science to it, a method to it. And then you had to learn how to change all the cutters and the knives and do a little bit of the welding on the press. So we had parts of the press. If anybody out there operated a press before, there's a part of the press called a stripper. You're always another thing, you're always in contorted positions when you're changing these parts. But when you're operating these strippers, and one slip of your hand, one slip, you're jamming your hand into into some what could be very sharp knives. I've literally had, in each of my hands, I've had more than at least a half a dozen stitches at some point in each hand, and sometimes I've had really bad. I've cut down at a bone where it chips your bone, and you get hematoma. And I think that's what they call it, where it looks like somebody shoved a tennis ball under your hand and it blows up. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, I forgive my tangent, but I do not like putting my hands to. I'm still a physical worker, so to speak, not nearly like I used to be, but I get cuts on my hands, and I don't like getting oil on them. And I highly recommend that you don't either, because you did an oil on a cut, and that oil, firstly, that oil could cause an infection on its own, but a lot of times oil's picking up dust, dirt, all kinds of contaminants. That gets in your cut, and you could have a problem. As I said before, I've had some pretty bad incidents, and I've seen some even worse ones. So that was, back to this now. I'm sorry to go off on that diatribe there, but I just did a few passes on each side for a couple of minutes, really taking my time. I'm not in a rush at this moment, but so let's see what we got here. I mean, it's sharp. I mean, it's sharper than it was. Let's put it that way. I would not call this razor sharp as of yet. I can really see the difference actually in the grinding. It's a lot more fine, but this is the first time I'm using and I'm going to go a little quicker like I normally would rather than taking my time here. Because sharpening really should only take a matter of a few minutes. I'm sorry, I'm trying to protect my bench. by using a tail, and it's becoming more annoying than it is helpful. This is how I would normally, when I'm not talking and filming. This is about the speed I would sharpen at generally. I normally don't like switching hands. I have a weird little dynamic where I throw with my left hand, play sports with my left hand, but I'm really right-handed. I do everything with my right hand. Your normal everyday tasks, shaving, eating, writing. I prefer my right hand easily. Trying to keep these strokes even. This is a 2x6 stone, I believe. A 3x8 may have been a little better, but I want to say it was a lot more money. And you know, we're at the age where buying expensive Christmas gifts for each other is not really a thing. You know, we're at the point where we need to begin thinking about planning on retiring, and there's certainly things around the house we would like to do. So let's give this a try. See a tiny bit of a dull spot there. Well, that's definitely a lot better. That's nice and sharp. Now, I tore a little at the bottom here. I think it's because this very tip here, I guess what we call a hilt, is not, I'm not getting that. It's probably the little locking, the flip mechanism there. So you can flip the knife open. It's sort of blocking. When I get down, it hits the box that the stone is in. I'm gonna do one more pass here because this is the first time I'm sharpening this knife on such a fine stone. We're supposed to have a break in the weather next weekend. Not flipping the stone around just to keep the wear even. Where it's supposed to be in the near 60 degrees, like not what I would call spring-like weather, but almost. I enjoy history, and I read about it often. I belong to a couple history groups. And yesterday at Washington's Crossing, they do a yearly reenactment of the crossing, the famous December 25th crossing. And yesterday, it's pretty ironic they had to cancel the reenactment because, firstly, the frigid temperatures, but what really hurt was there was giant pieces of ice on the river, just as the night of the crossing back in 1776. And it's funny, if you read about that point in history, in this area that took place in Washington's Crossing, Pennsylvania, over into New Jersey, and they traveled north to Trenton to attack the Hessian garrison there. But what is kind of funny is this area of Pennsylvania, it's notorious, this area of the country really, not just Pennsylvania, it's notorious for very odd winter weather, where, for instance, today, as I said, I think the projected high was 24 degrees, and we're lucky if it's going to reach that. Actually, it looks like it's going to snow any minute. But next week, we're supposed to hit 60, just a week from today, actually, and during that same campaign, when the Continental Army attacked Trenton, they defeated the Hessian Army. They had to return there a week later because Cornwallis and his troops were coming back to retake the town, and they ended up getting stuck in. Cornwallis's army ended up getting stuck in mud, believe it or not, because the temperature, they went from a blizzard, a nor'easter blizzard, to spring-like temperatures in a week, and it was considered sort of almost like a miraculous event to them. But it's pretty common around here this time of year, as I said, to have 1 week you're literally down into single-digit temperatures, and I'm not talking Celsius, but Fahrenheit, and for 2 weeks later for it to be 60 degrees. So that is what we're looking at now. And back to woodworking here, or sharpening at least. So that is definitely sharp, which is a good thing. So my stone works, and I will strop it. Now I'm not sure what the consensus opinion is when it comes to sharpening, or stropping, I mean, after sharpening on a fine Arkansas stone, but I use a strop for basically everything, so I'm not going to make any exceptions. I found that stropping helps clean up any burrs or any tiny little polish all those little micro scratches that you make. And certainly a fine Arkansas stone is going to polish as well. I have no idea of the reputation of the maker there that I have. My wife picked it up for me. I'm sure it's just fine. So let's see what we got here. Oh, got a wet piece. That's nice and sharp. So yeah, that's pretty good. I'm sorry, I have a tiny little puddle here. When I picked this up, there was water or some rust remover, I mean, in the actual socket, and it tripped down onto my bench and onto this piece of paper. Yeah, I'm mildly impressed. It's not bad. Let's see here. See if we can, how it does twirl. So, that's all curly. So I would say that's pretty sharp. So yeah, it's my first ever attempt to sharpen with a fine Arkansas stone like that. I did videos in the past, if you haven't seen them, where I use, forgive me, I don't know where it is. I'm sorry. Oh, I forgive me, but I did some videos in a few months, maybe a month or two ago, where I use an inexpensive Arkansas stone that I got from a home center years back. Now this is the black surgical level, so supposedly a much finer grit, really for final honing. If I had to this knife was not dull as I demonstrated when I started the video. It was just not at a razor sharp level. If I had to really get this from dull to sharp, I wouldn't have started with that black stone. I'm sure most of you who are watching these videos are probably aware of that, but just in case, yeah, a dull knife, you want to start with there it is. Going blind. This guy right here. This is more of a medium grit, which would be more of a, I don't want to necessarily say grinding level, but It's a lot closer to grinding than it is to polishing, but this actually will put a bit of a polish on your tools. I've done it. So yeah, it was. I'm. This brand is called Best Sharpening Stones. It's bestsharpeningstones.com. I gotta tell you, I'm not affiliated with this company in any way, shape, or form. I don't know anybody who works there. My wife got this for me for Christmas. So, um, that being said, it seems like it's a pretty decent sharpening stone. I'm not going to go out and tell you I recommend it. That's all you saw. My first impression is your first impression. That's the first time I use it, and I'll use it more and more. I do have a couple of chisels that I'd like to polish up, and perhaps I'll video those. Perhaps not. I don't like. I certainly don't like putting all these sharpening videos out because I'm really not hardly an expert at sharpening. I'm just a little bit better than your typical person who's never sharpened a day in his life. But I do know a little, and I find sharpening videos kind of boring, to be honest. But I'm not going to bore people with angles and all the minutia that comes with learning how to sharpen. I find that dull as sin. But I do think that sharpening videos do have merit, because it certainly is a skill that translates not just into woodworking but your everyday life. I'm a big fan of the writer Robert Heinlein, and he had a famous quotation about specialization being for insects, that to be a man. I'm not sexist. But I use man here because that's what Robert Heinlein used. To be a man requires knowing how to do more than just one thing well. It really, a man should be able to do a lot of things well, or at least aspire to do a lot of things well. And that's really what I'm all about at this stage of my life, is getting better and becoming smarter every day, keeping myself active, learning new things, which I find is really a key to your not just happiness, your mental well-being, your quality of life, all that. Not to get philosophical, but if you make a wholehearted attempt to improve yourself every day in some way, shape, or form, you'll be happier, and you'll probably feel better. Our mental well-being translates to our physical well-being, and I do feel better even on a frigid day like today. I do feel better standing at this bench. I mean, working with my hands, using my brain, trying to form coherent sentences, which is not always easy. I'm not a great orator, and I'm not great at speaking about what I'm doing. There's people that are really very skilled at that. I'm not one of them. I like to think I'm a fairly eloquent person, but I'm not an eloquent speaker. And my eloquence perhaps comes through better in my writing than it does in my oratory. But I try, and I've gotten better. And one thing I do when I do these videos, I've told you guys many times, I don't strip them out. I don't plan ahead. I get an idea in my head, and I run with it. And the one you might find that some people might find that boring, dull, and it can be. I'm sure it can. But the other thing is, I at least I like to say that you're getting the natural me. This is how I talk in everyday life. I don't stutter as much. I'm a lot better when I'm not filming. I tend to stutter when I film. I don't stutter in real life very often, not at all, really, to be honest. But I do try to present myself as naturally as possible, and hopefully that does come across. So once again, thank you very much for watching. And if I don't film another video between now and and New Year. I hope you guys have a happy and safe New Year. Be careful out there. We always call it an amateur night, and it certainly is. A lot of idiots out there, drinking a little bit too much, driving, and behaving foolishly. Avoid that if you can. Have a great time. Have a great New Year, and thanks for watching. Bye.